Hi and welcome to a quick presentation on the new tools that have been developed in Excel 2010, how they compare to Excel 2007, and more particularly the focus we have or the tools that we are finding that we use a lot. It's quite a quick presentation. You're welcome to ask questions. I'll probably only be able to answer them towards the end. So the first new tool, which is an unbelievably good tool, is something called Sparklines. And effectively what these are mini graphs that can display what your spreadsheet is trying to tell you. So for example, what I have here is a very simple spreadsheet. I've got a product X and product Y, and I've got some annual numbers. But I want to see what are my sales looking like for product X in a quick way. I don't want to necessarily look across here and see what they are. So if I click in a cell, I've just made it yellow to be obvious, and I click on Insert, you'll see next to Charts, there's a new tool called Sparklines. And if I click on Sparklines, you'll see I seem to have an option of a line, a column, or a win-loss. I'm just going to focus on line. These other two you can play with on your own spreadsheets. So when I click on it, you'll see it wants to know where the data range is and where the location range is. I've identified the location already. So when I click on data range, I'm just going to highlight that entire section. And when I say OK, notice that a very little line appears, giving me the trend of the numbers here. You may also notice over here that there's a new toolbar called Sparklines, and there's a number of things you can do with regard to what it looks like, the colors, etc. The nice thing about the Sparklines is I can now click on it. When I go copy, I can paste it down, and it's now adapting itself and looking at the correct areas. So let's just quickly do that. So you can see when there's a negative number, there's a downward trend. You can highlight those. Here's the balance sheet. So you can see that very quickly you can get a sense of what the data is trying to tell you. So I find that extremely useful. Let's look, these are pretty much straight lines, but let's look at situations where the lines aren't necessarily straight. So if I go to this sheet here, what I've got here is on a monthly basis the occupancy of a new hotel. So you'll see in the beginning it starts very low. As we go across, there's lots and lots of data, and you'll see it all differs depending on seasonality and how the hotel has grown. So what does that look like? Well, nice and simple. I click in the cell, I go Insert, Sparklines. I'm going to use a line again. Where must it go? C10 is already selected. What's the data range? Click here, highlight them all. And when I say OK, you get a very quick view of what the occupancies look like. So you can see it starts quite low, then it starts, you can see the seasonality starting to come into it, and then eventually it hits a bit of a peak. So it's quite nice to get a quick view of a very long spreadsheet of what is actually happening in it. Another good example, what I've got here is the house prices from 1970 on a monthly basis all the way to 2010. So what does that look like? That's lots of data. I've also got the prime rate in each of those months, what the debt funding rate was, and the month-on-month growth in house prices. Again, we go Insert, put a line in, what's the data range, highlight them all. You can say OK. And when I go back, you can see that this is what it's showing. And it's quite interesting. For years and years, house prices were pretty much flat. It's only recently that it's gone the major kick. Let's copy that and paste it on the prime and the month-on-month growth. And you can see that prime fluctuates. It goes up, it goes down, etc. And the month-on-month growth is also a bit of a yo-yo. So we believe Sparklines are an exceptionally useful tool for this type of thing. It can be used for visual presentation for reports, maybe a dashboard type thing. We also find it useful to see if there's been a mistake made. Any jagged section could indicate an error. So it's a nice way of quickly seeing if a very long spreadsheet has got problems. If you have any questions on any of this,
the broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
hello and welcome to the presentation. This is just a quick presentation to give you an idea of how we can use certain aspects of the new Excel 2010 to better enhance the spreadsheets. I'm going to show you a few new tools and some enhancements on some older tools. So what we're going to start with is Sparklines. So I've already drawn them in and I'll show you how to do them just now. But in this little cell you can see a line. And what this line is a graphic of what the numbers over here represent. So as you can see, this is product X's sales, and you can see there's a steady upward slope. And I've copied this across, so for the cost of sales, you'll see it goes gently down. When we get to the balance sheets, we see that. Perhaps more relevant is where there's a bit of a squiggle. Here the lines are pretty much straight. So let's look here at Sparklines 2. You'll see what I have here is hotel accommodation occupancies from the start of the hotel for a 5-year period. What you can see is quickly, with a Sparkline, you can quickly see where the occupancies start, a bit of seasonality, and you'll see without having to go and look at 60 months worth of data, you can see it. Another good example, before I show you how to do it, is over here. These are the house prices from 1970 all the way to 2010 on a monthly basis. We've got the prime interest rate over that same period and the month-on-month growth. So you can see that very quickly. You can see, for example, the house price growth, initially not much movement, then suddenly a big jump. So how do you draw one of these? Well, it's very simple. I'm going to draw it here. I'm going to click on that cell. If I go to Insert, next to the Charts options is something called Sparklines. When I click on Sparklines, I've got a choice of a line, a column, or win-loss. I'm going to choose a line. Wherever you are is automatically chosen as the location. The data range, so what we're asking now is what must we look at. I'm going to go click on that cell and highlight the entire row. And when I say OK and go back, you can see that the Sparkline has been included. When you're on a cell with Sparklines in it, you'll notice there's a new toolbar. And that new toolbar allows you to do things like change the colors. There's a couple of options, change the type of graph. So it's a particularly useful tool to visually represent what's happening, particularly in long rows or columns of data, where it's not so easy to scroll down or across and see what is it trying to tell you. What does it mean? So that's Sparklines, and it's probably the most important new feature in my mind in Excel 2010, the one we've been using the most. The next new feature, although it's not a new feature, is an enhancement to an old feature, and it's part of the data validation. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back to Excel 2007 and just show you data validation. And there was one particular limitation with data validation in the older version. So here I have an input I want to include, and I want it to be a list based on these names. So I could highlight here, I go to data, data validation, I can choose a list, and I can choose the source. Now the problem with Excel 2007 was the list had to be on the same sheet. I couldn't do this. You'll see if I try and click on that other sheet, it doesn't allow it. I have to use this list here. It has to be on the same sheet. And now you've got your choice. If I go back to Excel 2010, I try the same thing, but you'll notice in the separate sheet, I have my list as well. I can highlight it. I go to data, data validation. I choose my list. But now when I click on source, you'll see you're allowed to click on another sheet. You can highlight it. Say OK. And now this list is irrelevant. I can now choose from this list. So that is quite a nice new enhancement so that you can have all your lists on a single sheet, and then the rest of your spreadsheet can cross-reference to these lists. In a similar vein, conditional formatting has also enhanced in that way. So I'm going to go back to Excel 2007 and look at some conditional formatting. So here I have various branches and their revenue growth, and I want to link it so that it turns, for example, a color if it's above whatever is in a cell. Now in Excel 2007, if I go to Home, Conditional Formatting, and for example I say greater than, instead of clicking here, what I'd like to do is go to another sheet and click here. So it looks like it's going to allow it, but when I say OK, it gives us a warning. Conditional formatting could not link previously to other sheets. You had to link it to the current sheet. In Excel 2010, if I go there, same thing, I can highlight it. I go to Home, Conditional Formatting, greater than. You can see I can now click on another sheet, click on the button, and when I say OK, it allows it. So again, you can see it gives you the ability to put all your inputs, all your drivers onto a single sheet as per good spreadsheet practice, and then have the colors and the formatting change on your various report sheets. Another nice aspect of the new version is that the data bars have been expanded to be a little bit more user-friendly and better looking. Again, I'm going to go back to Excel 2007. And you'll see here I've got a whole bunch of data. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to go to Conditional Formatting. If I go to the data bars, you'll see at the moment I've got 6 options, and we can make a change to other colors. I'm going to choose that one, for example. Click on it. So there you have the conditional formatting. Let's see what it looks like in Excel 2010. Same thing, I'm going to highlight it. Go to conditional formatting, data bars. Notice there's a slight change. You've now got something called gradient fill or solid fill. So depending on what you like, you can change whether it's a solid color or there's a bit of a gradient change in the colors. So I'm going to choose this for now. And you'll see that's what that looks like. Probably the more important feature is how these data bars handle negative numbers. Excel 2007, if I highlight it and I put data bars on, you'll notice that the negative number is just the smallest of the band. And that may be a fair reflection, but I think Excel 2010 is showing it in a much better way. When I click on it, I highlight it, I go to Home, Conditional Formatting, and when I now put my data bars on, you'll see it actually draws a little axis and the negative number goes negative and turns red. So I think that is a much better representation of what this list of numbers means. Another new feature, although slightly minor, is to do a data autofilter. So let me just remind you what it looks like in Excel 2007. So Excel 2007, you've got this long list. We've switched the autofilter on. When we click on the drop down, you'll see you've got the ability to sort and filter, and then you can choose. So you can see you've got all these items you can choose from, and sometimes these are very long lists. The new feature in Excel 2010, same thing, looks exactly the same. When I click on it, make it a bit bigger, you'll see these are all exactly the same, but there's now a search bar in here. And what this allows you to do is these lists can sometimes be very big. You can see there's a long list here. And you can actually reduce how many options you have by typing in the search. So for example, I know that my search item contains the numbers 2, 3. You'll see now only available to you is all items that meet the condition that it contains a 2, 3 in it. And you can then select from here if maybe it contains just a 2, there's that list. If I delete it, then there's the entire list. So all it does, it makes it a little bit easier for you to automatically find the ones you're looking at, specifically if there's long lists. So I believe that's a very useful component. Next aspect that we find quite useful is just a slight change in the way paste special works. So again, I'm going to go back to Excel 2007. If I've got a section like this, I copy it, maybe with a right click, I say copy. When I come here, when I right click, you'll see the option here is paste special. If I paste it. If I say paste special, we have to go through this list to decide how we want it. So for example, I'm going to say values, and there we have it. In Excel 2010, same thing, I'm going to highlight it, we're going to copy. But when I come here, notice when I right click that there's now, we can click on paste special, but we also have these little icons. And watch what happens as I hover over the icon. So as I hover, Excel gives you a small preview of what it's going to be. So it hasn't pasted it, but it's just saying that if you use that icon, it will look as it's showing below. So if, for example, I want to do a paste value, I'll click on the 1, 2, 3 option. When I click, you'll see it pastes as values. So two aspects there. One is the preview to show you what it will look like in the cells it will fill. But to me, the more useful bit is that you have immediate access, as long as you remember which icon means what. you've got immediate access to the paste special items. Again, a very small thing, but something that we found extremely, extremely useful. Another new tool in 2010, which I can't show you because it doesn't exist in 2007, is the ability to add a new ribbon. So you may be familiar that in both versions, at the top here, you've got the quick access toolbar. And it's relatively easy to add things to the quick access toolbar. You just find something you like, for example, the decrease font button. You right click on it and you'll see there's an option to add to quick access toolbar. But the new version actually allows you to customize the ribbon. So to actually create your own customized home or insert, for example. To do that, very easy, right click on this here, and you'll see at the bottom here, we've got something called customize the ribbon. When I click on that, you'll see it shows you all the ribbons that exist. I've got an option here to create a new tab, a new group, etc. I'm going to create a new tab. You'll see there's my new tab. I'm going to click here and just rename it so you can see it. We'll just call it test. Say OK. And you'll see in here now, I have the ability to rename that. Let's just add a few buttons to it. So I'm going to click here and say edit, edit, edit. And when I say OK, you'll notice that there's now a new ribbon item here. And when I click on it, the buttons I've asked for appear in it. So if you have lots of buttons and perhaps your quick access toolbar is not big enough, you can actually set up your own customized ribbon item with all the tools and features that you like. Again, not a major change, but it just gives you the ability to customize a little bit better your own version of Excel. Again, what I'm showing you here is not every new feature in Excel 2010, just the ones we like. So I'm going to just point out a couple of changes to functions now. I'm going to go over here. And a number of formulas or functions in Excel 2010 have been enhanced just to allow for a little bit more use. And it's well worth keeping your eyes open as you create functions and formulas to make sure that you don't miss the new ones, because people tend to get stuck on certain formulas, and if they just look around a little bit, they may find a better one. So for example, a nice one that I'd like to use is something called NETWORKDAYS. And what the NETWORKDAYS function does, click on the function wizard and go find something called NETWORKDAYS. When I say OK, this gives you the number of working days between two dates. So it asks for a start date, it asks for an end date, and it asks for your public holiday, so we can highlight it. But what's important about this one is that it is assumed that weekends are a Saturday and a Sunday. So when I click OK, it tells me there were 19 work days in that period, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and the public holidays. But what happens if you don't live in a country that has weekends on a Saturday or Sunday? What happens if you're in an industry that Saturday and Sunday are actually work days for you? So perhaps the restaurant industry where only a Monday is maybe considered your weekend. So if you go to the function wizard again, you go NETWORKDAYS, but you just go one lower, you'll notice that the new version in Excel 2010 has the same thing, but it's got something called .intl. So now I'm going to click on that one, and you'll notice it's very similar. What's the start date? I'm going to point there. What's the end date? Point there. But suddenly there's something called weekend. And weekend is a number or string specifying when weekends occur. Now there's a lot of them, so to try and remember them is quite difficult. So instead, I'm going to go to help on this function. And in the help file, if you go down, you'll notice that you need to put a number in to specify what is considered a weekend. So if you leave it blank, or you put a 1, then it's what we normally expect, Saturday and Sunday. But notice there's a number for every possible option here. So if you put a 2, then Sunday, Monday are weekends. Probably a more useful one, 7, Friday and Saturday are weekends. So that's for something like Dubai. And then you can see, you can actually specify one day of the week as well. So perhaps the restaurants are closed on Mondays, so you'd use a 12. In this case, we're going to use a 7 because we're going to use Friday, Saturday, assuming that we live in Dubai. So I'm going to go to weekend, I'm going to type a 7. And I'm going to give the holidays, highlight those public holidays. And when I say OK, you'll see that there are now 18 work days in that same period if we were in Dubai versus 19 work days in South Africa. And that same feature exists in a number of places. So there's a function in Excel called Workday. If I go and I find the Workday, I just go one lower and I discover there's something called workday.intl. And the same rule applies. It tries to identify what in your mind is a weekend in your industry. What is the days that it must not count? And just the last thing we're going to touch on is the ability to close all spreadsheets. Now this is something that actually was a problem in both Excel 2007 and Excel 2010. So I'm just going to show you this. I'm going to just open up a few more blank spreadsheets. So you'll see I've opened up 4 spreadsheets, and in Excel 2003, so the 2 versions back, if you wanted to close your entire Excel and you clicked on the top close button, it then closes everything and it'll just go through asking you what you want to save. If you wanted to close just that spreadsheet, you would have clicked on the second X. But in 2007 and 2010, if I close, what I think I'm doing is I'm closing the entire Excel. When I click on it, what it does is it only closes the one spreadsheet, and then you have to go again and click it again and again and answer all the various questions. And we have found that a bit annoying. So if you want a quick way of doing it and having it react like Excel 2003, our suggestion is under your quick access toolbar, right click. I'm going to go to something called customised quick access toolbar. The commands, I'm going to say it's all commands. And what we're looking for is something called close files. So when I click on the C's, and I keep going down, you'll see an option here called close all. Now I already have it in my quick access toolbar, but you would need to add it by clicking here and saying add. When I say OK, you'll see it appears here. And now watch what happens. I've got 3 spreadsheets open in Excel 2010. When I say close all, you'll see it goes through and says, okay, do you want to save this one? I'm going to say don't save this one. It then goes to the next one and says, do you want to save it? I'm going to say don't save. And then it will close down. So you have got the ability to close it all. So that's just a quick introduction of what has changed, or some of the more useful changes in Excel 2010. If you've got any questions, I'm going to stay online for a couple more minutes. Feel free to ask. And if you've got any questions, send an email, and any feedback on how clear the presentation was with internet access in your company. Wait online for a while, ask any questions you like.